The city of Lahore, soaked in history and humming with the energy of old traditions and modern dreams, is where the story of Imran Khan begins. It was October 5th, 1952, when Imran Ahmed Khan Niazi was born into a family that carried both privilege and purpose. Nestled in the heart of the city, within the boundaries of an affluent neighborhood, his family home echoed with voices from the past, tribal, aristocratic, and deeply rooted in the soil of the subcontinent. His father, Ikramullah Khan Niazi, was a civil engineer, a product of discipline and middle-class ambition. His mother, Shaukat Khanum, came from a family renowned for their philanthropy and strong cultural ties. The Niazis were a branch of the Pashtun tribe that had, over generations, settled in Punjab. Although their tribal origin traced back to the wild mountains of Mainwali, their values blended into the more refined rhythms of urban Lahore. Imran was the only son among 4 sisters. He was raised in a household steeped in tradition but not devoid of modern aspirations. His mother, gentle yet firm, instilled in him a sense of empathy and quiet strength. His father, proud and pragmatic, ensured that his son was equipped with the tools to lead, not just in the technical sense of engineering or economics, but in character. Growing up in post-partition Pakistan meant inheriting a country still shaking off the dust of colonialism. The wounds of migration were fresh, yet there was a bubbling optimism in the air. Lahore, once a jewel of the British Raj and now a burgeoning Pakistani metropolis, represented a cultural bridge between what was lost and what could still be created. In its gardens and tea houses, in its cricket fields and mosques, the city carved its spirit into Imran. Imran's early childhood was marked by a quiet demeanor. He wasn't the loudest in the room, nor the one always rushing into mischief. But there was an intensity in his eyes, observant, self-contained. He would often retreat into books or cricket matches in the garden, absorbed in his own world. There were whispers among relatives and family friends that the boy was destined for something bigger, though few could define exactly what that meant. His first schooling was modest, close to home. He learned to recite verses from the Quran alongside arithmetic tables. His mother made sure he never lost touch with his faith, even as his mind stretched towards science, history, and, of course, cricket. Early photos show a lanky child with shy smile, holding a bat that seemed far too big for his frame. But even then, the stance was perfect. The wrists, loose. The eyes, focused. Cricket, as it turned out, was more than a sport. It was a language that Pakistani spoke fluently, a national pulse that unified across class and creed. In Imran's childhood, it was a bond between boys in white uniforms and men smoking under banyan trees, discussing scores and swings. He would tag along with older cousins to the Lahore Gymkhana Club, where the crisp sound of leather on willow became music to his ears. Family life was structured but warm. Meals were shared, prayers were observed, and the elders were respected. There was little indulgence. Imran would later speak of how his mother ensured that even though they were well off, he was never allowed to act entitled. "No one is above hard work," she'd often say, her words like soft hammers shaping his inner code. It was this foundation that prepared him for the next chapter, formal schooling at Atchison College. But before that, his formative years were deeply colored by a figure he would come to revere long after her passing, his mother, Shaukat Khanum. She was not just a homemaker, she was a silent revolutionary in her own right. Her strength was subtle, yet absolute. She taught him about dignity, charity, and resilience. Years later, when she died of cancer, the pain would push him to build Pakistan's first cancer hospital in her name. But in his childhood, she was a moral compass that kept him centered. The political air in the 1950s and 60s also made its way into the drawing rooms of a Niazi household. Discussions about Ayub Khan's regime, the war with India, and the rise of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto weren't shielded from young Imran. He listened, absorbing the nuances of national identity, injustice, and the perils of power. These moments would stay lodged in the crevices of his mind, resurfacing decades later when he'd step into the same political arena. Still, in those early years, he was just a boy with a bat and a thirst for understanding the world. Neighbors would remember him as polite but intense. He wasn't the type to follow blindly. If he asked a question, he expected an answer that satisfied logic, not just tradition. If a game had rules, he wanted to master them. If someone doubted his potential, he didn't argue. He just quietly resolved to prove them wrong. He was not immune to criticism, though. Some relatives worried he was too quiet, too westernized, or too into cricket. But his parents let him be. They saw something simmering under the surface, something that needed time, not taming. By the age of 9 or 10, Imran began to show an unusual combination of traits: fierce independence and deep loyalty. He would stand up for his sisters, yet refuse help on his own homework. He hated losing, whether on the pitch or in an argument, and would spend hours improving, whether it was his bowling action or his grammar. There was one moment, family friends recall, that captured young Imran's essence perfectly. A cousin had made fun of his cricket technique during a casual match. Imran didn't retaliate with words. He trained silently for weeks, then invited the same cousin to another match and bowled him out 3 times in a row. No gloating, no anger, just a look that said, "Never underestimate me again." Lahore, in many ways, was a crucible. It gave him his accent, his competitive spirit, and his understanding of Pakistan soul. The city was both his playground and his classroom. It taught him pride, but also pain. It taught him culture, but also contradiction. By the time he was ready to step through the gates of Atchison College, he wasn't just a boy from a good family. He was a thinker in the making, a fighter on the rise. He didn't know it yet, but every prayer his mother whispered over him, every story his father told at night, every moment of discipline or freedom, it was all preparing him for cricket, for politics, for destiny. Atchison College wasn't just any school. It was a legacy wrapped in ivy-covered walls, colonial columns, and the echo of aristocracy. Founded in 1886 as a college for the sons of the elite, landlords, nawabs, ministers, it was a place where future rulers were molded. And now, it was the next chapter in Imran Khan's formative years. When Imran entered Atchison, he stepped into a world that felt both familiar and foreign. The buildings were grand, the uniforms crisp, the traditions strictly British. Students walked in polished shoes down paths once trodden by the scions of empire. Yet behind the high walls and manicured lawns, something more subtle was at play, an unspoken expectation that each boy would uphold a certain legacy of power, grace, and discipline. For Imran, the transition wasn't seamless. Though he came from a respected family, he wasn't one to boast or demand attention. His classmates were often louder, more socially adept, and more accustomed to the privilege that came with being an Atchisonian. The early days felt isolating. He watched from the sidelines, quiet, observing, calculating the new hierarchy. But if there was one thing Imran had already learned from home, it was resilience. He didn't seek shortcuts to acceptance. Instead, he let time and skill do the talking. In class, he was bright, not the top of every subject, but meticulous and competitive. His teachers noted that he had a unique seriousness for his age. He didn't chatter aimlessly or indulge in class politics. When he spoke, it was precise. When he answered questions, it was clear that he wasn't regurgitating information. He was thinking. Yet it was on the cricket field that he began to distinguish himself. Atchison College prized its cricket culture, and matches were grand affairs. Captains were treated like kings. Victories were remembered for years. Imran, tall and wiry, with a bowler's shoulder and a batsman's poise, quickly caught the attention of the coaches. Still, talent alone wasn't enough at Atchison. You had to prove yourself again and again. You had to outwork your rivals and outlast your critics. That was where Imran shined. He practiced relentlessly, often staying back long after others had left. He studied the greats, Grace, Bradman, and later, Sobers and Lil Lee. He learned not just how to play, but how to win. A quiet transformation began. The boy who once stood alone during recess was now the one teammates looked to for momentum during a match. His confidence grew, not loud, but solid, like a foundation being laid brick by brick. Outside the cricket ground, Atchison's curriculum shaped another side of him. The British-style education emphasized logic, history, and debate. Imran was introduced to ideas that would later define his worldview: justice, leadership, the burden of the elite, and the contradictions of power. One teacher, an elderly Englishman, saw something rare in the boy. "You don't speak much, Khan," he said once, "but you think like a man twice your age. That will serve you well if you don't let the world silence it." Imran never forgot that. At home, his parents noticed the changes too. He was becoming more disciplined, more assertive. He'd argue fiercely about fairness, especially if he felt someone was being mistreated or underestimated. He didn't crave approval from elders the way other children did. He craved purpose. Still, Atchison wasn't all triumph and growth. It was also the place where Imran first truly experienced exclusion. Despite being among Pakistan's elite, he was still very much a product of a traditional household. Some boys mocked his accent, others saw his reticence as arrogance. At times, he felt like an outsider even among the privileged, and that, perhaps unknowingly, planted a seed of empathy in him, a sensitivity to those who were cast aside or looked down upon. It was also here that he became acutely aware of the vast gap between different classes of Pakistani society. While he and his peers discussed cricket tactics or Oxford ambitions, he'd sometimes watch the janitor's children playing barefoot along the boundary wall. Something about that contrast stayed with him. He began to wonder why opportunity was a privilege of the few. Why couldn't every child have what he had? Why did some families have to beg for health care while others bought seats in Parliament? These weren't yet political questions, but they stirred something fundamental in him, a disquiet, a belief that something was deeply unjust in the way society was structured. By the time he was in his mid-teens, Imran was a force at Atchison, respected by juniors, feared by rivals. He had emerged from his shell but kept his quiet dignity intact. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He simply performed. Whether it was in the classroom or at the crease, he was steadily building his reputation. Still, his parents knew that if he were to truly expand his horizons, he'd need to leave Lahore. The decision was made. Imran would be sent to England for further education. It was a rite of passage for many sons of Pakistan's elite, but for Imran, it was more than that. It was a portal to a world that could challenge him, humble him, and, most importantly, complete his transformation. Before he left, he made one final appearance in the inter-school cricket tournament. It was a blistering performance, 5 wickets and composed 60 runs. The headmaster shook his hand afterward, noting, "You play with the quiet fury of someone who knows exactly where they are going." And perhaps, in some way, Imran did. As he packed his bags for England, he looked back at Atchison not with nostalgia, but with gratitude. It had tested him, sharpened him, and revealed to him the power of self-belief. He was no longer the boy trying to blend in. He was someone who had learned how to stand out without compromising who he was. He wasn't just leaving for another school. He was heading into the heart of the former empire, ready to study it, compete with it, and eventually challenge it. The gates of Atchison closed behind him, but the world was opening up ahead. England, a land of foggy mornings, stone-paved courtyards, and centuries-old institutions. When Imran Khan arrived in the UK, it wasn't just a change in climate. It was a cultural awakening. He stepped off the plane a young man from Lahore, already shaped by tradition and discipline, and stepped into a world that would test everything he thought he knew. The first stop on this journey was Royal Grammar School, Worcester, where he was enrolled to complete his A-levels. For most Pakistani students, this would have been an intimidating transition, from the close-knit familiarity of home to a country that moved faster, spoke differently, and operated on a completely different social rhythm. But Imran, though quiet by nature, was never afraid of solitude or discomfort. Where others may have hesitated, he leaned in. He quickly found the British education system both rigorous and liberating. Teachers encouraged debate, asked questions, and challenged assumptions. At Worcester, Imran wasn't just memorizing answers. He was learning to think, to analyze, to form opinions that would one day shape policies and inspire millions. But even more transformative than the classroom was the cricket field. In England, cricket wasn't just a national sport. It was a religion with its own rituals, heroes, and sacred grounds. The grass was different, the pace more methodical, the strategy more nuanced. Hey, Imran didn't just play. He studied the game. He learned swing in the damp air, the subtleties of English pitches, and the mental warfare behind every delivery and stroke. It didn't take long for people to notice. There was something different about the boy from Pakistan. His athleticism was natural, but it was his intensity that stood out. His bowling had bite, his batting was crisp, and most of all, he carried himself with a strange blend of humility and quiet arrogance, the kind that belongs only to those who know they are destined for greatness. Despite being far from home, Imran found a rhythm in England. He became more independent, cooking his own meals, managing his studies, and navigating society that, in many ways, still viewed outsiders with suspicion. There were stays, assumptions, and sometimes even subtle racism. But he refused to be rattled. His silence became a shield. His cricket, a sword. After completing his A-levels with strong grades, Imran secured admission to one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, Keble College, Oxford University. Oxford, the city of spires and scholars. Walking its cobbled streets, Imran joined the ranks of the elite, studying philosophy, politics, and economics, PP, a course that had produced prime ministers, diplomats, and economists. For a young man raised between conservative values and colonial legacies, Oxford was a paradox. On one hand, it was a haven for intellectual freedom. On the other, it carried the weight of empire, entitlement, and exclusion. Imran was surrounded by future leaders from around the world, many of whom had never known hardship or limitations. But he did not shrink. He was often alone in thought, often an outsider in social circles, but never invisible. Professors were struck by his discipline and sharp mind. Classmates noted that while he didn't speak often in tutorials, when he did, his points were sharp and undeniable. He approached political theory the way he approached cricket, with strategy, patience, and a keen eye for weakness. Outside the lecture halls, he continued to rise in the world of cricket. Imran played for Oxford University's cricket team, where he made a name for himself as a fast bowler with an unrelenting work ethic. His performances against county teams drew attention from professional circles. He was tall, lean, and explosive, possessing a kind of raw grace that few had. Yet it wasn't always smooth sailing. His bowling action, aggressive and flamboyant, was questioned. Some critics said he was too wild, too unrefined. But Imran, true to form, didn't argue. He simply trained harder. He reshaped his action. He studied biomechanics. He transformed himself into one of the most technically sound bowlers of his time. In the evenings, while other students drank in pubs and discussed poetry, Imran often trained. While others debated Marx and Machiavelli, he pored over footage of English and West Indian fast bowlers. He was becoming something rare, an intellectual athlete, a man of both mind and muscle. His looks, sharp jawline, intense eyes, and undeniable charisma didn't go unnoticed. He became a popular figure in Oxford's social scene. He was often seen at parties and dinners, mingling with aristocrats, artists, and politicians' children. Yet beneath the charm and polish was a laser focus. He never lost sight of his mission. Though he enjoyed the social glamour, he remained deeply connected to his roots. He would call home often, especially to his mother. He missed her cooking, her calm voice, her grounding presence. And every time he visited Pakistan during term breaks, he returned to Lahore, not as a star, but as a son. He still prayed with his family, ate at the same table, and listened to his father's long reflections on Pakistan's troubled political history. The duality of Imran's life at this time was striking. By day, he was an Oxford student in tweed, sipping tea and quoting Locke. By evening, he was Pakistan's rising fast-bowling phenom, terrifying English batsman. And late at night, he was a young man from Lahore, writing letters home, wondering if this strange path was truly leading somewhere. In 1971, just as Imran was adjusting to Oxford, his home country was going through a seismic shock. The Bangladesh Liberation War had begun. East Pakistan broke away, becoming an independent nation. Pakistan was wounded, humiliated, and confused. Imran, watching from afar, was shaken. This was more than a war. It was a rupture in identity. It marked the first time Imran began to think seriously about politics, not as an academic subject, but as a personal calling. He saw how leadership had failed, how arrogance and injustice had torn the country apart. And even though he didn't speak about it publicly then, a conviction began to form. Pakistan deserved better. One day, I will help fix it. By the time Imran graduated from Oxford in 1975, he had already played international cricket for Pakistan. He had his degree, his discipline, and his dreams. And now, he was ready to step fully into the global arena. He left England not just as a scholar or sportsman, but as a man forged by fire. He had learned how to command respect in foreign lands, how to silence critics with performance, and how to carry his nation's hopes on his shoulders without letting the weight bend him. The British chapter had given him knowledge, fame, and refinement, but his journey was far from over. Now, it was time to return to Pakistan, not as a boy, not as a student, but as a rising icon. And the world would soon witness the rise of Imran Khan, the cricketer king. When Imran Khan stepped back onto Pakistani soil after Oxford, the dust of Lahore hit him like a memory, raw, loud, unfiltered. But he wasn't the same boy who had left. He returned not just as a graduate, but as a rising name in international cricket, shaped by the elegance of England and the rigor of its sport. Still, home had its own kind of gravity. Pakistan was waiting, and so was the world. Imran's return marked the beginning of a cricketing chapter that would not only define his career, but also alter the identity of Pakistani sports forever. He began playing for Pakistan's national team in the early 1970s, but it was in the late 70s and early 80s that he truly began to shine. At a time when the team was inconsistent and lacked leadership, Imran brought something rare: professionalism, ferocity, and clarity of purpose. He wasn't just fast, he was lethal. Bowling at over 90 miles per hour, with a perfectly honed action and a penetrating outswinger, he became one of the most feared bowlers in the world. But unlike others, he was also a batsman of substance, a true all-rounder, capable of rescuing a match with his bat or crushing hope with his pace. His presence on the field was magnetic. Tall, broad-shouldered, and intense, Imran had the poise of royalty and the fire of a street fighter. Opponents respected him, fans adored him. Pakistan, a country star for heroes, began to see in him not just a player, but a leader. Off the field, he was different. While his teammates relaxed between tours, Imran trained. He ran in the heat, practiced late into the night, studied footage obsessively. He expected as much from his teammates as he did from himself, which often made him unpopular within the dressing room. He didn't tolerate laziness or mediocrity. He fought with a board when he felt the system was broken. And it often was. By 1982, the inevitable happened. Imran Khan was appointed captain of a national team. He was just 29. And in a deeply traditional system, not everyone was ready for a captain like him. Imran didn't lead with soft words or empty promises. He demanded fitness, unity, and sacrifice. He banned alcohol in team events. He introduced mandatory training schedules. He personally oversaw net sessions. To some, it felt tyrannical, but to many, it was transformational. Under his leadership, Pakistan began to win, and win consistently. They beat India. They conquered the West Indies at home, a team many thought unbeatable. They won in England, and most importantly, they began to believe that they belonged at the top. Imran's leadership was unique because it was built not just on skill, but on example. He wasn't a captain who barked orders from the slips. He led from the front, whether it was batting in crisis situations, bowling through pain, or standing up to match-fixing rumors and corrupt administrators. Imran was never afraid. One of the most defining moments came during the 1987 World Cup. Pakistan was one of the favorites. The tournament was hosted on home soil, and expectations were sky-high. Imran played valiantly, but the team fell short in the semi-final against Australia. For many, that would have been the end. Imran was already in his mid-30s, nursing injuries, and carrying the weight of a decade of leadership. He announced his retirement, a move that sent shockwaves through the country. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. In 1988, Imran's mother, Shaukat Khanum, was diagnosed with cancer. The battle was brutal, and she passed away the same year. Her death shook Imran to the core. He had always been close to her. She had been his emotional compass, his confidant, his anchor. Her passing didn't just leave a void. It lit a fire. Imran returned to cricket, not just for himself, but for a larger purpose. He vowed to one day build a cancer hospital in her name, something Pakistan sorely lacked. But to raise the kind of money needed, he had to reignite his legend. And so, the comeback began. It culminated in the 1992 Cricket World Cup. Pakistan started the tournament disastrously. They lost matches, looked disorganized, and morale was low. Critics wrote them off. But Imran was unshaken. Wearing a white shirt emblazoned with a now iconic tiger, Imran addressed the nation in a press conference. "We will fight like cornered tigers," he declared, a line that would become etched in cricketing history. And fight they did. With Imran as captain, Pakistan clawed their way into the semifinals, and then into the final against England. In front of over 87,000 fans at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, Imran played one of the most significant matches of his life. He scored a crucial 72, led the bowling changes masterfully, and took the final catch that sealed Pakistan's first and only World Cup victory. When he lifted the trophy, it wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a moment of national pride, unity, and belief. For millions of Pakistanis, it was the first time they had seen themselves as world champions in anything. Imran had given them that. He retired for good after the World Cup, this time on his own terms, going out as a hero, a conqueror, and an icon. But he wasn't done. The next phase of his journey would be even more daunting. He turned his attention to his mother's dream. He began fundraising for what would become the Shaukat Khanum Memorial Cancer Hospital. People doubted him again. They said he didn't understand hospitals, or charity, or management. But Imran had never needed permission to attempt the impossible. He traveled across Pakistan, speaking in villages, towns, and cities. He auctioned off memorabilia. He visited expats abroad. He faced bureaucratic hurdles and financial shortfalls. But he didn't stop. In 1994, the hospital opened its doors in Lahore, Pakistan's first and only comprehensive cancer center, offering free treatment to those who couldn't afford it. It wasn't just a hospital. It was a symbol. Imran Khan had proven that with vision, commitment, and defiance of the status quo, even the impossible could be built brick by brick. By the mid-1990s, he had gone from a privileged boy in Lahore to a sports legend, to a philanthropist and national reformer. And yet, there was still one frontier left, the most turbulent and treacherous of all: politics. Because deep inside Imran Khan still lived the boy who had watched injustice in schoolyards, who had questioned inequality at Atchison, who had seen a country break in two from bad leadership, and who had vowed, silently and fiercely, that one day he would help fix it. The stadiums had gone quiet. The cheer had faded. The World Cup was won. The hospital built. For most people, that would be enough. A life lived in full, a legacy already secured. But Imran Khan was never interested in enough. His gaze was still fixed on something greater, something more dangerous, the soul of Pakistan itself. Imran's journey into politics wasn't a carefully calculated move. It was a collision of frustration, of ideals, of decades spent watching his country stagger between corruption and incompetence. Where others saw a crumbling system and stepped back, he stepped forward. In 1996, Imran Khan officially launched his political party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, PTI, the Movement for Justice. He envisioned a party that would be different, clean, honest, grounded in merit and accountability. It wasn't about dynasties or backdoor deals. It was about giving Pakistan something it had never truly had, a government that served its people. But the arena of politics was nothing like cricket. There were no clear rules, no umpires, no boundaries, just shifting loyalties and endless traps. Imran quickly found himself up against a machine far more powerful than any fast bowler or match-fixing syndicate: Pakistan's entrenched political elite. His first elections were a disaster. In the 1997 general elections, PTI barely registered. Imran lost his own seat. He was ridiculed on television, mocked in drawing rooms, and labeled as naive. The same country that had once hailed him a hero now scoffed at the idea that he could govern. But Imran wasn't looking for quick victories. He was building something deeper. He toured the country again, not as a cricketer or celebrity, but as a listener. He went to schools, mosques, and slums. He sat with farmers, laborers, students. He heard the same stories everywhere: corruption, powerlessness, broken promises. And he stayed. Most would have quit, retreated to luxury. But Imran Khan dug in. His rallies grew slowly. His message sharpened. No to corruption. Yes to justice. Pakistan first. In the early 2000s, his political career moved through storm after storm. He was jailed briefly in 2007 during General Pervez Musharraf's emergency rule. He led student protests. He clashed with the establishment, spoke out against American drone strikes, and refused to play by the old rules. While other politicians played musical chairs with power, Imran refused to compromise. Critics dismiss him as a spoiler, an outsider, a dreamer chasing illusions. But under the surface, something was shifting. By 2011, a wave of disillusionment was rising in Pakistan. The youth, frustrated by unemployment, nepotism, and hopelessness, was searching for a voice, and Imran gave it to them. That year, he held a historic rally in Lahore's Mani, Pakistan, drawing hundreds of thousands. It was electrifying. People came not just to see a politician, but to believe again. The media called it a political earthquake. Suddenly, PTI was no longer a fringe movement. It was a force. The 2013 election saw PTI emerge as the second-largest party by popular vote. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KPK, PTI formed a provincial government. It was Imran's first real test. He implemented police reforms, launched health initiatives, and tried to bring transparency to governance. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. It was proof of concept. Still, national power remained elusive. In 2014, Imran launched a massive Azadi March, a protest movement alleging widespread election rigging. For 126 days, he camped out in Islamabad, calling for justice, reforms, and accountability. Critics called it destabilizing. Supporters called it revolutionary. One thing was clear. Imran had become the center of national attention. No longer an outsider, he was now the storm. And then, finally, in 2018, after 22 years of struggle, skepticism, and sacrifice, the tide turned. PTI won a majority in the general elections. Imran Khan, once the outcast, the athlete, the idealist, took the oath as the 22nd Prime Minister of Pakistan. It was a surreal moment. The man who had watched politicians fail his country, who had been beaten in elections and belittled in headlines, was now leading the very nation that once doubted him. His first speech as Prime Minister was raw and honest. He promised austerity, accountability, and development. He moved into a modest home, refused to live extravagantly, and slashed unnecessary government spending. He met with world leaders, sought peace with neighbors, and launched bold welfare programs like the Asaz program and seat cards. But governing Pakistan was a beast unlike any he had faced. The economy was unstable. Global pressures mounted. Political opponents circled like vultures. The media, once his cheerleaders, turned critics. Inflation soared. COVID-19 struck. Crises led over crises. And yet, Imran remained defiant. He spoke directly to the people through televised addresses. He railed against corruption, foreign interference, and elite capture. He leaned into his populism, framing his mission as a battle between good and evil. Many believed in him. Others grew disillusioned. In 2022, a political storm brewed into a full-blown cyclone. A no-confidence motion was brought against him in Parliament. Despite efforts to block it, Imran Khan was removed from office, a dramatic and controversial end to his premiership. But if anyone thought that was the end, they didn't know Imran Khan. Post-ouster, his rallies drew even larger crowds. His popularity surged. He spoke of foreign conspiracies, of betrayal, of unfinished missions. Millions still saw him as the only leader who wasn't corrupt, who dared to dream differently. His critics accused him of authoritarianism, of undermining democratic norms. His supporters called him the only honest man in the room. The lines were drawn sharply. Imran Khan had become more than a politician. He had become a symbol. As of now, his political future hangs in a delicate balance. Legal battles, political threats, and institutional pushback swirl around him. But one thing remains unchanged, his refusal to surrender. From Lahore's quiet colonial lanes, to Oxford stone halls, to the thunder of cricket stadiums, and the chaos of political rallies, Imran Khan's journey is one of reinvention, resilience, and relentless will. He has been a boy of privilege, a man of the people, and a voice for the voiceless. He may be controversial, he may be polarizing, but he is, without doubt, one of the most consequential figures in Pakistan's modern history. And whether you love him or loathe him, Imran Khan's story is far from over.